The UN Climate Change Summit is into its second and final week in el-Sheikh, Egypt. And these are scenes of the International Convention Center for COP27. Its location. World leaders, delegates have been meeting there, as I said, now into the second week to tackle global climate change. Progress, though, appears to be backsliding, according to report cards that are being handed out now. Sarah Larniuk is tracking the story from London. And Sarah, a lot of attention, as always, to the 1.5-degree warming target. Is it still achievable?
That was absolutely the question coming into this conference, and it is true that national commitments don't yet add up to 1.5 degrees, and most countries are still failing and falling behind on even those lackluster commitments. But what we're seeing is that representatives of national delegations and scientific bodies are very hesitant to call that goal dead because though reaching that target is increasingly unlikely, it is not yet impossible. What many representatives in Egypt are shifting to by way of messaging is saying that every 1/10 of a degree matters. So 1.5 degrees might be falling out of reach, but 1.7 is still better than 1.8, and so on. But others are just refusing to let go of that 1.5-degree goal. I spoke with Catherine Abreu this morning, who is a longtime Canadian climate campaigner, and she is an advisor to Canada's Net Zero Advisory Body. She is in Egypt for the conference, and here are some of what she had to say.
No, 1.5 is not dead. The thing that I think gets really missed in these conversations when we are being told to give up hope on limiting warming to 1.5 degrees is that it really hinges around government's ability to double down on the transition away from fossil fuels and toward renewable energy. Consistently, when I hear people talking about giving hope on 1.5, I see them really missing the conversation about the need to accelerate the energy transition.
We know that we have already warmed by 1.1 degrees globally, and we always knew that 1.5 degrees would require international transformational changes on a scale we've never seen before. And we just haven't witnessed that yet.
You know, Sarah, we were talking last week about the Climate Action Tracker and their report that says the world has pretty much a 50-50 chance of keeping warming to 1.8, as you were talking about. Canada, it found, completely failing to meet its commitments. Now, have you heard any more about that?
So today at the conference, delegations are engaged in what's called a global stock taking, where they are combing through all of the commitments made in Paris in 2015 to see how countries' actions are comparing with their actual commitments. And we don't have the results from that process right now. And while this technical process does have to be taken on by the UN because that's where these commitments were made, we do know from the multiple reports from NGOs like Climate Action Tracker, we already know that everyone is falling short. And as Catherine Abreu noted, the continued expansion of oil and gas in Canada is a big factor.
The main thing standing in Canada's way of meeting our climate commitments is emissions from our oil and gas industry. And the fact that we have failed to address emissions from that sector for decades of climate policy at this point.
The oil and gas sector makes up more than 1/4 of Canada's emissions, and between 1990 and 2020, the sector's emissions increased by 74%. And it's also worth noting, and a lot of noise has been made about this, that at the conference, 600 lobbyists are registered as representing oil and gas companies.
Sarah Larniuk in London, thank you very much.